Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your usual host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is my co-host, UberHansen, and joined with us is Jon Helmkamp from the Cover One Draft Weekly Show. He is a very well-informed person, much more well-informed about the NFL draft in particular than either of us. So, and that's kind of saying something for me. I mean, Uber, you don't really care about college football, but yeah, you do what you can. But we are here to talk about the draft, the Bills, and basically anything that is not a wide receiver. Because there's been so much talk about wide receivers with this class in particular, just because it's such a great class, but also because in relation to the Bills with Stefon Diggs trade, even before the Diggs trade, there was all this talk, should they take another receiver, should they get all that. Now, we're here to talk about other people that are not wide receivers, that are options for the Bills. Before we get started, gentlemen, how are you? Uber, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I'm good. I guess because I'm not spending every second of my free time, focused on my day job, I'm lazy. I don't put in enough work. This being just a hobby means I'm just a lazy person, because if you're not always focused on your job 24/7, then you're just a terrible human. At least that's what I learned on Twitter today, with certain topics about a certain Bills player.
This is one of the reasons why I'm glad I'm not quite as connected to Twitter as I normally am. All right, so hold on. You're drinking a LaCroix. I think Jon is also drinking a LaCroix. Are there other drinks that people are having on this? Okay, so we're at two LaCroix and one.
I'm double fisting. Okay,
you're double. You're doubling up. Okay.
I got the locked and loaded high octane in one hand and the LaCroix for flavor in the other. Okay, we're having fun. We're ready to go. Uber, you're completely accurate. You lazy bum. Like, God, would you just focus on some shit, please? I'm stoked. I'm excited to get into this. I'm quite honestly, I'm a little tired of talking about the wide receivers, and they're great, and I love them, and I love this wide receiver class. I promise you, probably 2 to 3 of them will make their way onto the Bills roster, but there are other positions, and the Bills have 10 picks remaining. There's still a lot of ammunition for trade ups, for trade downs, for all kinds of moves. Brandon Beane, he's got an itchy trigger, okay? He's not going to just stand pat with these same 10 picks that he has right now. There will be moves. I promise you there will be trade. If there's no trade involving any of these 10 draft picks, I don't know. I might have to shotgun some. I might have to shotgun some 16-ounce, 10% IPA nonsense and just go for it, because there's going to be trades. But that said, there are other positions and needs on this Bills roster, and there's a lot of good players to talk about. And I'm glad that we're going to be talking about something other than wide receiver for once. I feel like it's all I've been doing for 3 months when it comes to the Bills, and rightfully so. But you could also walk away with some really high impact players at other positions that we do need on this roster, and I will be stoked.
I love it coming with the heat right off the top. We'll get into some of these comments right off the top. RJ, hey everyone. Hello to RJ, strong, longtime supporter of the show and Cover One. Just the tip of canoe, still one of my favorite names on here. What it do? Spin, what I want out of the draft, at a minimum, a wide receiver, a safety, a defensive tackle, 3 or 1 tech, corner, runner, running back, and returner. So
you'll probably get 90% of those at least.
You'll probably get all of those players, just not at the value that you want all of them to be at, probably. Spin also says, is that Dave's brother? Dave's brother also has a righteous beard, just not quite as righteous as what Jon is sporting there. So yeah, it is what this is a great facial hair podcast, by the way. Like, Uber's got a very nice, well-kept beard. I've got my, and Jon, Jon's outclassing us all, clearly, and he knows it. He knows it anywhere he goes. He's outclassing just about everyone with his facial hair. So, yeah, it's what It's what's gonna happen. RJ also says Brandon Bean already said every pick is gonna be wide receiver, so I'm gonna beat that.
That was a great interview spot for him to go on Pat McAfee during the winter meetings and just play into it, just leaning hard into the bit, and I respect it. It was great.
There was a friend of mine in high school who is a Browns fan, and he told me once, this was like when we were seniors, so this is the 2014 draft, right? And so he was like, David, the Browns need a quarterback. I'm like, yes, they're the Browns. And he's like, what if they just take a quarterback in every single pick? I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. He's like, but one of them's got to hit, right? And if you look at the 2014 class, I mean, if you really like Derek Carr, I guess one of them does have to hit. So
I know this is a football podcast and especially a Bills podcast, but the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, 2 seasons ago, I think it was, they used every single draft pick, all like 20 of them or something like that. I don't know the exact number. I'm not an MLB draft as much as I am an NFL draft, but they used every single pick that they had in the MLB draft on pitching. The entire draft. Not a single position player. And I was like, that is bold. And I respect it. And I would love to see an NFL team do the same thing and be like, you know what? We're going wide receiver 7 rounds in a row. I don't care. We're just doing it, and we're stockpiling them. It was beautiful to see, actually. I was working at Deadspin at the time, and it happened. And I was like, I am writing that article 100%. That's beautiful.
Joe DeRosa from Under Review says, beyond wideouts, you mean there are other positions? Haha, nice joke. Yes,
all right, Joe, see you next week.
That is true. And that is something we should mention. John from this show and NFL Draft Weekly, along with Joe DeRosa from Under Review and Thomas DeLaus from Buffalo Late Night, are all going to be at the 2024 NFL Draft in Detroit, Michigan. And as you can tell, John is very excited about that. So they're going to be on the ground. They're going to be boots on the ground. They're going to be like hell divers, just launching straight from orbit down onto the surface in Michigan. They're going to be covering everything on site. We'll have our own feed that you would normally get here with us. Actually, and we'll discuss this more near the end of the show, or maybe even next week. Probably again next week as well. But Uber and I will also be a part of draft coverage. So look forward to that. Before we get any further into this, I do have to take care of. Hold on. Yeah, go ahead. Go for it.
Joe, you better know you're been in Detroit, bro. Beautiful.
Joe, he's improvising. He improvises his whole life. I'm fairly certain. No, not really.
That's accurate.
Before we get any further into this, we got some business to take care of, and that of course starts with our wonderful friends Greg and Aaron from the Cover One flagship show.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Thank you to Greg and Aaron for their immaculate reading on that. As always, the exact same every time. Hard to beat. Joe is with me, covering the draft for Democracy and for Super Earth. Of course, one of my friends is also trying to invite me to play Helldivers 2, like right now. Like it's anyway. So we are also very happy to be sponsored as usual by our wonderful friends, and they are over at Underdog Fantasy, folks. We know that it is not really fantasy season right now, but when it is fantasy season, Underdog Fantasy has got you covered. Because if you have just the one home league and that one draft each year isn't enough for you, Underdog Fantasy is for you. It's all the fun of drafting your own players, but without the waivers and lineup decisions. Best ball drafts allow you to have all the fun of drafting your own team, all the chances to win big, and none of the week-to-week hassle. If you use the promo code COVER1, that's the number 1 when signing up to make your first deposit, Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is a free $100 in free play if you use promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start winning today. All right, we're going to get into the meat of this, and we're just going to jump right into it. And I'm going to start with you, John. If you're going to talk about a position, we're going to start with a position group that you want to talk about that the Bills should think about, particularly high in this draft, in those first 2 or 3 rounds, right? Something that is not a wide receiver. What are you looking at, and who are you looking at from that group?
Well, of the wide receivers I love, I'm just kidding. I'm not going there. We're not doing it today. This is not a wide receiver show, folks. We're not doing it. Here's what I'll say about this draft. It's a really, really interesting one because there's several positions that are very deep. You can get wide receivers all over the place. You can get offensive line all over the place. There's a lot of offensive linemen in this draft class that offer NFL starter upside at all 5 positions. A lot of them are going to have flexibility where you can kick them around. You can move them to multiple positions. There's 2 positions on the defensive side of the ball in particular where I think it dries up really, really fast. That is edge and that is safety. Yes. Those are 2 positions where there are not a lot of guys that offer starter caliber upside in their range. And, you can always be surprised by someone. It happens every year. Someone's going to pop that was drafted round 5 or later. It happens. It does. It's a combination of opportunity and coaching and self-belief and work ethic and a myriad of other intangibles that come into it. But looking at the board, looking at the talent that's available, edge is one that if you need edge, you better get it really, really early. There's a couple safeties that I like that are available rounds like 3 through 5. There's a couple there. But if you need a safety, and Sean McDermott did a really good job, honestly, of putting together a safety duo. But I think we're comfortable with starting in 2024. I think we're good with what we have rolling into the start of the season. But I still think that he wants to draft someone to develop, that he wants someone that's going to be able to learn and come into the system and grow, especially because the safeties that we have aren't on super long-term deals. So I still think safety is a priority for walking in and learning the ropes a little bit of developmental aspects, someone that can contribute on special teams, have that versatility to come in early. Safety and edge are the 2 on the defensive side of the ball that I think the Bills are very interested in, and that dries up quickly. And especially with wide receiver being so deep, which has been said for basically a year and a half. It's been said forever of this draft class. And it just kept getting better. More guys kept popping up that we weren't expecting, which happens every year. But at wide receiver in particular, if you don't go wide receiver at 28, please do not burn down the stadium, okay? Don't go jump into the pit. Don't go make a sacrifice to Jim Kelly. I don't need any of that nonsense, okay? If defense is picked at 28, that's okay. There's a lot of opportunities later to adapt and adjust. But yeah, edge and safety are the 2 that dries up the quickest. I think you can get techs pretty much throughout the draft, which I think is something that's definitely a position to need. Bills Mafia is going to want some depth there on the defensive line. Sure. I think you can get that. I think corner is like kind of a sneaky position that the Bills might need some depth at in this draft class also. I don't know if you guys talked about that or not, but I think corner is kind of a sneaky depth need also. I'm not seeing a 28, but throughout, this draft, I think there might be a corner or 2 that selected to go in there also. That one can wait maybe a little bit. But yeah, I think edge, I think safety are the two that, in my opinion, if you really need them, if you really want them, I think you should probably get on it in the first 3 rounds.
So you mentioned safety, obviously, and there's some guys that are there, like a Cam Kitchens, for example. But one of the big debates that's been happening over the last couple of months has been about Cooper DeJean from Iowa, who has played corner at Iowa for a long time, but some people view him as a corner, some people view him as a safety. Overall, is a very, very good plus athlete. And from what I've seen, this is somebody that you can play at either of those spots, and I wouldn't feel bad about doing that. Is there a particular camp that you fall in with DeJean in particular when it comes to this?
I like him best at corner. I think his natural home. I think his fluidity is good. I think his contested catch defense is good. I definitely understand the conversation, though, about like, hey, he's an athlete. He's a defender. He plays in the secondary. He has ball skills. Maybe you look at him at safety. I don't know. Just call it a gut feeling, but I don't feel like that's on the Bills' radar at 28. I could absolutely be eating crow on that statement, and people are going to like clip it and tweet at me for 3 years plus if we end up taking him and starting him at the post safety, because he can do it for sure. So I won't be mad if that's the pick at all. Like that, I think he's a very, very talented player, helps the secondary, period. Just kind of wherever you want to start him. I think he has kind of that Swiss Army knife ability where you can move him around wherever you want to play him, whatever you think your best combination is. And that's valuable. If you're looking at kind of your secondary and whether you want to be a too high look in this situation, or you want someone that can come down into the nickel in another situation, or whatever it is, he gives you a lot of fluidity in that arrangement stance. So because Sean McDermott is so defensive oriented, I can kind of understand rhetoric and being like, I don't know exactly what he's going to be on a down basis, but I know he's good, and I know he's fluid, and I know he's athletic, and I know he has ball skills. I just want a chess piece that I can plug and play wherever I want it. I get that. Like, if that's the pick, okay, cool. I'm stoked. You're good. And then you're going to see Sean McDermott get really aggressive on day 2 for a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. That's the way that I see that panning out. I know I said I wouldn't talk about wide receiver. I'm sorry.
It's part of it, though.
Like, it's all relative. It's all relative. Yeah. But that's the way I see that panning out. If it is Cooper DeJean, then I love the pick, because I think he is a Swiss Army knife that you could literally start anywhere in the secondary, and he would make an immediate impact. And I think if you're looking for an impact player that can be an impact player all over the place, that's a hard thing to pass up. I'm for it. If that's what it is, I'll be stoked.
Yeah. We'll take a look at some of these comments. There's a lot of comments tonight. Thank you all for tuning in and for participating. Charles G says edge or DT for me. RJ says, outside of wide receiver, probably need a center, guard, 2 defensive ends, a tackle, a couple of safeties, a corner, and a compliment to Cook as running back 2. Team needs a lot still. Look, and
RJ Melville's the guy that orders Instacart, ends up with a $300 bill.
That's...
So the other part to consider.
We're going shopping.
Like, I don't necessarily. I would totally agree with all. I don't think that there needs to be another center. I think you can have another guard or somebody that you feel good about, like guard center flexibility, sure. But at the end of the day, like, there's only so many picks that you can make in this draft, in any draft, and only so many of those players are making the roster. There's also other free agents that are still out there at various positions. You can still get some guys in free agency if you want them, and that's what they did last year, right? They got guys like Jermaine Ifedi, who, even though he didn't play a ton, if much at all, was somebody that was good to have on the offensive line as a backup. Leonard Floyd obviously was a huge signing for the Bills last year, and he came after the draft. Puna Ford was another guy after the draft. There's guys that can be contributors that will be good for this team that can be had after the draft is over. So, yeah, the sky is not falling if you don't get exactly who you want and every single position of need filled.
Can I bring up something?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I want to talk about the possibility of Jackson Powers Johnson at 28.
Sure.
Because I do think that is well within range of outcome, striking distance pick. And I see we actually have a comment that mentioned it. And this is something that I've been kind of pounding the table for a little bit over the last couple months. I'm an Oregon boy, born and raised in Portland, Oregon suburbs. My mom went to U of O. You know, I was born an Oregon Duck. So I've been following the Ducks for a very, very long time. Jackson Powers Johnson is a stud. And I don't care if you start him guard or at center. I think he has this is the loftiest of loftiest. So please take that with a grain of salt. But I think there's a range of outcomes here where he's like the Jason Kelsey center anchor, decade plus offensive line, a guy that can move and pull and contribute on those pulling, run plays. That's also super solid in pass protection. That's just an absolute cerebral center and anchor that offense line. Like, I know that center isn't maybe necessarily the biggest need, but if you're looking at the board and let's say there was an earlier run on a wide receiver than we thought there was going to be.
Sure.
Let's say Byron Murphy and Johnny Newton, whatever you want to call him, are both off the board where you're talking high-end defensive tackle guy. The wide receivers are off the board. I don't think a safety is a fit at 28. Cooper DeJean is gone. I don't know. I think there's a really realistic where JPJ is the best player available on the board and could potentially be an all-pro guy for a decade plus. And you just roll with that, knowing you've got 10 other picks, knowing that you've got flexibility to trade, knowing that you can make moves. And we know that Brandon Beane loves making moves. So maybe he just goes, okay, cool. I'm looking at my board. JPJ is a stud and we love him. And I think that we can get him here and plug him in and maybe at guard to start. Maybe he walks right in being day one center. I don't know. But I think that he is that caliber of player where it would be really hard to ask if the board doesn't fall the right way with some of the higher end needs.
So basically, go ahead, Duper.
Yeah, I actually see. I think it would be a great pick. So everything that I've heard about Jackson Powers Johnson is just what you said, John. That he has there is the possibility that he could go down as one of those special players. And if you get him at 28, you draft a player like that. You draft a player that can be the best at their position down the line. There's other players at 28 that could fall there that just won't have that upside. They'll still be really good, but they don't have that great upside. And as for the Bills, when you look at their roster, the way it's stacked up right now, I think we can all kind of attest to the idea that wide receiver probably the biggest need, just because they need a third legitimate guy not named Mac Hollins as their top three wide receiver. After that, though, if you go through their starters right now, the only real question that I have is center, and that's because they're moving Connor McGovern to center, and I don't know how that's going to work out. That has me concerned. Like David Edwards at guard, fine. I think they'll be okay with that. But Connor McGovern moving to center, if that doesn't work out, then you have to flip him back to guard, and then suddenly Will Clapp is our starting center. I don't like that idea. That's terrifying to me. So if I don't have to worry about that because you drafted Jackson Powers Johnson, he comes in, maybe you start him at guard. Maybe that's what the Bills do. And they say, okay, he plays David Edwards' left guard role. We'll give McGovern a shot at center. It doesn't work out. Flip the two, and then maybe that works out. So I look at that as a really, really good pick. I think a lot of Bills fans would probably bite their lip a bit and be like, a center with pick 28.
That would be... That'd be a phenomenal pick in the only offensive lineman jersey that I would buy on day one. I'd be like, fucking sign me up. I want a JPJ Oregon jersey on the back. Let's go. I agree with the thing that you said. Connor McGovern moving to center. It sounds good, right? Like it sounds good in theory. I know there was the podcast bit where he said that he was told that that was kind of the plan and all that. You can't put all your chips in that basket. I'm sorry. I knew this was supposed to be like a defensive conversation, but
no, go ahead.
You can't put all your chips.
Podcast goes. We go off the rails. We go into rabbit trails. This is how it goes.
But it's okay. Right. We're gonna come back. But on JPJ, you draft a guy that could be a day one starting guard. You see how the Connor McGovern experience works out at center. If Connor McGovern is a stud center, great, cool. You also have a stud guard in JPJ. If it doesn't work out, you have a really, really, really high contingency plan to move to center. It gives you more flexibility. Like offensive line is fascinating, and it's not just you draft this guy to be this position. That's not how the offensive line works in the NFL. You want that positional flexibility because you're looking at putting out your best five. Like that's what you're looking at doing. You're looking at the whole thing and going, what combination gives me the most success in the run game and pass protection, athleticism, whatever it is that are like the key markers for the offensive coordinator's system and what they want to do. You want guys that can fill that. So I think JPJ in some combination would be a day one starter. I don't care if you start him at left guard, right guard, center, whatever it is on the interior. You're looking at putting your best five out there, and he would fit into that and could potentially be an all-pro interior offensive lineman. I think that's well within the range of outcomes for JPJ. So, yeah. If that's the pick at 28, we rock with it. I'm buying the jersey on draft night for an offensive lineman. I hope he carries over his number 58 from Oregon. Let's go. Let's party.
I mean, you're comparing him to somebody who is like a Hall of Fame type of center in Jason Kelce, which obviously is high praise. But it sort of brings up an interesting point about, we talk about how certain position groups like, oh, well, getting this receiver or this running back allows you to do this, right? Getting this player allows you to do that. And I don't think we talk enough about how, like, offensive linemen with high-level athletic ability allow you to do a lot of different things with your offensive line. Like, especially a guy that can pull and be aggressive and get to the second level comfortably and easily in the way that Jackson Powers Johnson does. I think that that's a critical component in sort of taking your offensive line from good, which is where the Bills were last year, to potentially, like, high level, right? Like to something where you can pull out just about any sort of blocking scheme or stunt or whatever and execute it at a high level. Not just because you have talent there, which they do, but because you have somebody like Aaron Kromer who knows how to utilize that talent as well. Now, it would be kind of interesting because Aaron Kromer is an important part of this. And his sort of MO as an offensive line coach throughout his time with the Saints, through both stints with the Bills, with the Rams, has been to take really big athletic types that are generally more like tackle types, and basically just like, all right, we're gonna sort you here. You guys are gonna be tackles. You two are gonna be guards, and you're gonna be the center. Doesn't matter if you can snap or not. You're gonna be the center. I'll teach you how to snap, basically. But like. It's Jackson Powers Johnson. I would love that pick. I would be totally fine with that pick at 28. I'd be all in on that. Is that the type of player that they would take? Maybe, maybe not. I'm kind of leaning towards maybe not. But I also probably would have said that about Osiris Torrance last year. And they ended up taking him. And Kromer takes him and says, hey, this is who I've got, and I'm going to make him good. And Torrance was a pretty solid player for his rookie year. There's levels to this, like Jackson Powers Johnson would be a good pick and a good part of this offensive line for the future. And like, having Connor McGovern at center as a sort of contingency plan now that you've gotten rid of Mitch Morse and moving David Everest to guard is all fine. are either of those players like the types of players, the caliber of players where you're like, yeah, we don't need Jackson Powers Johnson. We've got Connor McGovern and David Edwards. Like, if you feel like Jackson Powers Johnson is going to be a really good guard, David Edwards should not be the type of player that keeps you from drafting Jackson Powers Johnson. It's not how that should work. Especially if you're a team that is going to purportedly take the best player available, like Brandon Bean often says he does.
And I would say too, like with Connor, so David Edwards to me is a downgrade to Connor McGovern. Connor McGovern to me is a downgrade to Mitch Morris. So in theory, right now, the way the Bills offensive line stands, I believe we've downgraded at 2 positions. If you bring Jackson Powers Johnson in, you go back to Connor McGovern as equal to Connor McGovern. And then Jackson Powers Johnson, is he better than Mitch Morris? That's a legitimate question that could probably be answered midway through the season. So in theory, you go from having 2 positions that were worse to possibly being better overall as an offensive line. Like that, there's a legit path to that if you draft a player of his caliber. So while it's not the sexiest pick in the world, because for some reason offensive linemen aren't sexy to everyone, they're sexy to me. I think that it would be a pretty solid pick for the Bills.
Excuse me, that is the peak of male athletic ability is the offensive lineman body. Okay,
yeah.
We're in it. Listen. This has been a very drawn out conversation on JPJ, and I love him, and I want it, and I think that it'd be a terrific pick. Again, it all depends on how the board falls.
Yeah,
if defensive backs, if edge rushers, if wide receivers, and the top defensive tackles are all off the board when we're 28. I'm just trying to prepare Bills Mafia here that this is a realistic outcome that could happen. And I think that it would be a really, really good pick. And you said it, that flexibility. I think you're right. We downgraded at 2 positions on the offensive line. JPJ can fill either one of them. And again, it's a chess game. You're picking your 5 best to put out there in some combination. And JPJ might be your best option at 3 out of 5 of them, potentially, when you walk in. At least 2, right? Like it's a conversation worth having for sure. So I just want to put that out there, especially because we've seen that the center position has really been in vogue in the NFL in recent years. Creed Humphrey, obviously Jason Kelce on his way out, Corey Linsley, Frank Ragnow, Taylor Linderbaum. Like there's been a lot of centers that have really stepped up into a key position, and all of those centers have one thing in common: they can move. These are guys that you can pull, that you can get out on either side, that can get to the second level, that can bury somebody. JPJ fits that mold. I think he's that center that walks in and you're putting him. He's super cerebral. He's great at picking up stunts. He's great at picking up everything on the front end. And then if you want him to pull and get out in front and put someone into the dirt, he can do that too. So I just want Bills Mafia to be prepared that there is an outcome where a high-level interior offensive line is the pick at 28, and I would be celebrating.
I think that's fair. The
okay, I just hold on 1 second.
Yeah,
Hold on. Troy Fautanu is not going to be available at 28. You stop it right now. I am like the biggest Troy Fautanu guy that you've ever heard in your entire life. Troy Fautanu is gone in the top 15. Like he is not making it anywhere close. But I appreciate the comment and what you're saying there about offensive linemen.
The last thing I'll say on this is there's been a trend in this past free agency where guards have gotten a ton of money. Like interior offensive lineman has gotten a ton of money, and it's worth.
It's a big position right now.
Yeah, it's worth considering taking a rookie and that cost-controlled asset at a position where the money is just getting thrown around. So it's worth considering. So outside of offensive line and outside of center, let's move into this edge class. because this is a very odd edge class to me, where there seems to be a consensus 3 guys at the top, with Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, and Leatu Latu. And then there's like your Darius Robinson, Darius Robinson and Chop Robinson. Are they? Am I just now realizing? They're both last name is Robinson.
Pair of them.
How am I just now realizing this? I knew both of these guys existed. I knew both their last name was Robinson. I just now put it together that they're... Anyway.
Well, so what you want to call Darius Robinson. He's a real tweener edge, 3-tech,
and that's
kind of
sort
guy.
of...
But yes.
That's part of the discussion is like Darius Robinson. Like I'm always iffy on tweeners, especially on the defensive alignment, because you got to be able to figure out something that makes me feel confident that you can do this in day one, where I don't have to necessarily scheme up my entire defensive scheme around how do I get this guy into a position to succeed, even though he may not fit around the rest of the other pieces in the way that we've built this defense. You know, like Ed Oliver is a little undersized for a 3-tech, but that doesn't mean he doesn't fit with what the Bills do, because he's done it the last 5-6 seasons or whatever. You know, Greg Rousseau is not like the thickest defensive end, but he's long and strong enough to be able to fight through offensive linemen at the NFL level and play both in the run and in the pass game really effectively. So I feel fine about that. With Darius Robertson, it's sort of like, and I haven't watched a ton of Darius Robertson, so I'm hoping you can shed some light here about him in particular. But tweeners always give me just give me some feelings of like, let's pump the brakes here and figure out what we actually have instead of dreaming about what he could be potentially at multiple positions.
Yeah. I agree with what you're saying about Darius Robinson. Darius Robinson is really interesting because he was down there at the Senior Bowl. Okay, so I got to see him in person being down there, and that was great. Really cool to see him down there. He was really twitched up. He was a mover for sure. I liked him at edge, although I thought he was a little bit small, but I think as a 3-tech, I like him. I think that he is athletic. I think he uses his hands well. I think that he can move. I think that he can be a bit of a disruptor as a 3-tech defensive tackle. You're not putting him inside. You're not putting him lined up on an interior sort of thing. So for Darius Robinson, it's been really interesting because the hype on him has really gone crazy. Really since Senior Bowl. I mean, really over the last 2 months, month and a half, the hype on Darius Robinson was like, oh, yeah, no, he's like a toolsy guy that teams might like on day 2 to being like, he's a first-round lock, gonna go, late first in the 20s, something like that. And that's bold to me. I'm not in love with it at that value because he is kind of raw. His lower half is kind of slender, like he's not the most built dude, like in his legs and stuff like that. And I know we're talking about like men's legs and all that, but we're doing it. So get ready. It was one of those weird things. I'm sitting there. I was with Eric, the head honcho, the El Poobah, the almighty. We're there down in Mobile and we're sitting in the stands and we're watching drills. And he just kind of goes, his calves are really skinny. And I'm like, no, you're right. Like he is, like he's just kind of lean through the lower body, which, that's the horsepower. That's where the motor comes from when you want these defensive linemen to be able to get after it. He is lean. So he is interesting to me, but I think that he has a little bit of kind of a narrow lane to success in the NFL. And when I'm looking at these prospects, I want to talk about like what's within the range of outcomes, what can they do well, what are some areas that they can grow. Are there multiple avenues to them being good at the next level? And for him, I think it's it's a little narrow. It's like, okay, you're a real tweener between edge and 3 tech. You're going to have to be able to handle strength. You're going to be able to handle power, I think, a little bit better than what he shows on film, and be able to really generate some drive that I don't necessarily see as well. So he's interesting. He's athletic. He can get after it. I absolutely have no interest in that at 28. I think if he's on the board somehow at 60, or I don't know, maybe Bean loves him and he goes, yeah, I'll move from 60 to like 49, 50, somewhere in that range. Like, okay, cool. I can understand that pick because he is kind of toolsy and he has some fun stuff in his bag, but that's not a player that I'm super interested in going at 28.
Yeah, and to David's point too, and David, I couldn't agree with you more on this. The idea of a tweener, especially in the early rounds, is not something I'm interested in because I want a player that I'm comfortable can dominate at a position, not necessarily dominate. And it's funny because we just talked about how Jackson Powers-Johnson can dominate at 2 positions, but I think that's a very different scenario.
That's very, very different. Very different.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about a guy that can play inside and outside on the defensive line, that's just so much more difficult because the skill sets are so varied. I do like a player like that later in the draft, finding a guy in the 5th round, 6th round that is a tweener because it gives them 2 paths to see the field. But my goal in the 1st round, my goal in the 2nd round, whether it's 28, 60, wherever you want to pick in those first 2 rounds, isn't a guy that has a chance to see the field. It's a guy that can dominate on the field. And those are just 2 very different things.
Totally agree.
Yeah. And it's hard for me to figure out a place for him specifically with the Bills, right? Like in a vacuum, somebody like Darius Robinson is like very, very intriguing. If you're talking about somebody coming onto this team right now, it's sort of like, I don't really know where to put you, man. And I don't know what to do with you.
Can I make my prediction there for Darius Robinson? I think we let him slide and Detroit takes him with the next pick.
I could see that.
That's what I think happens. I think they want the athleticism, someone opposite Aiden Hutchinson, to give him a little bit of versatility. It seems like a pick that Detroit doesn't care what your board looks like. They didn't care that Gibbs was a 2nd round grade. Last year they took him and they loved him and they wanted it. I can see them having the same kind of mentality about Darius Robinson and being like, nope, you're good. We want you. Throw you opposite Darius or opposite Aiden Hutchinson in some combination. And we just want you on the field. Like that's honestly a scenario that I can see playing out on draft night.
I think that's fair. Spin here says, I wouldn't be mad at Johnny Newton, the defensive tackle at pick 28. I would be very happy with that pick because he's a very good player. I don't think he's getting anywhere near 28 at this point. I'd be very surprised if he made it that far into the draft and hadn't been taken. My hot take, which we'll reveal that next week. We'll do that next week. But yeah, I don't think he's making it to 28. Charles G says Laiatu Latu is visiting the Bills. So let's talk about Laiatu Latu. Because so Laiatu Latu is a good player. Laiatu Latu also has a bunch of red flags for his medicals. So the first question I want to ask you, John, is Laiatu Latu worth considering in spite of those medical red flags?
I'll go one further that Laiatu Latu is not lasting to 28.
Go on.
It's not is he in consideration at 28? There's people talking about him as being the best edge rusher in this draft.
Right.
Laiatu Latu is a stud. I had the opportunity very gratefully, very humbly to be able to talk him down at the Senior Bowl. I was able to go down on the field after one of the practices and I snagged him for a minute and got to talk to him and ask him a few questions. And after the cameras rolled, he was nothing but a gem of a person. He was respectful. He was great. I'm nobody. I'm nobody. I'm Jon Helmkamp from Cover One. I'm cutting my teeth. I'm not like Daniel Jeremiah or anything like that. And he was like, "Yes, sir. Yep, absolutely, sir." Like super respectful, super polite, super just like he'd been, whether it's how he was raised or it was his agent or I don't know, but just who he is as a person, he's great. And he gave the time of day and let me ask as many questions as I wanted. When the cameras weren't rolling, he was like, "Hey man, thanks so much. Like, appreciate you coming up and talking to me." And I'm like, "Yeah, dude, absolutely." I'm a Pac-12 guy, Oregon. Like, I watched you against Oregon. I watched you against, Washington and what you did. Watched him go against Tali Fuaga, right tackle for Oregon State. That's a fun matchup. Go watch that film. They each got each other a couple times. Fuaga threw him out of the club once, which was really funny. But Leatu Latu is a great person. He's going to interview well with these teams. People are going to love the character. They're going to love the production for the last 2 years when he got to UCLA. If you're not aware, what happened was that he went up to Washington. University of Washington is where he started his collegiate career. He actually broke his neck. And they told him, "Hey, you should be medically retired. You should never play football again." So that's what these questions are coming up. And I've brought this up kind of all off season. If there is some sort of medical red flag, yellow flag, even that gives teams pause and they don't want to go for it with those concerns, if you want to call it, even though he's multiple years removed, didn't miss a game, he's been playing, he's been productive. Like, to me, it's not a concern at this point. But if there are those concerns teams and he falls into the lap at 28, there are very, very few players in this draft that I would not tell Brandon Beane, if I was looking him straight in the face, go draft that dude like right now. I think Leatu Latu is available at 28. I told you earlier, it's a thin edge class. This is not a super, super deep edge rusher class. If Leatu Latu is available at 28, I don't care what receiver outside of the top 3 receivers is available. If it's not Marvin Harrison Jr., Rome Dunze, or Malik Neighbors, Leatu Latu is the pick. There's nothing else on the board. I don't care if it's Johnny Newton. I don't care if it's Cooper DeJean. I don't care who else it is. If Leatu Latu somehow falls because of medical concerns, you sprint to the podium. And I will be backstage in Detroit going to be like, "Someone fucking give me the phone to call Brandon Beane right now." And they'll be like, "Who the hell is this?" And I'll be like, "Just some guy. Don't worry about it." But I will be doing whatever I can do to get into the Bills' ears. Nobody, they won't listen to me. I'm just joking. This is all satirical. But
you say
there is not a player. I will run. I'll go sprinting. I'll get kicked out of the draft. They'll take my credentials. I'll just be booking it in Brandon Beane's direction. Like, yeah, dude. Like, just going for it completely. He's a stud, man. Like, he is such an athletic mover. He's got this speed rush ability. He's got a strong inside arm move that's great. He's really good at timing his hands and chopping down moves from offensive linemen. He's uber productive. His production profile is great. If Latu is available, you get him. I would trade up for Latu. I'll tell you that if I'm Buffalo. If Latu is sliding and he's there in like the early 20s, we know that Brandon Beane has all these day 3 picks and stuff like that to work with. Move from 28 to, let's say, 22. Throw in a 5th round pick or something like that. Make it, whatever the math adds up to be that's needed compensation. I'd move up. If Latu's sliding, I would go get him in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Yeah, just watching what I have of Latu, he's very, very good player. And, looking at where the Bills are with their edge position right now, with Greg Rousseau going into his 4th year as a player, with Von Miller being the age that he is in. You bring back AJ Epinesa, who's nice to have in a rotation, and it's good to have, especially after the last year that he had with Buffalo. Was a very good season, easily his best season, I think. But I think, he's only on a 2-year deal, so it's hard to say that he's part of the future in Buffalo. He can very easily have 2 good years, and then some other team is like, yeah, we'll pay him this time. Whereas with Rousseau, you really got to make a decision on whether or not to keep him long term, and if you do, how much are you paying him? That's a premium position. It's going to require a good chunk of change in order to keep somebody like Greg Rousseau. Von Miller obviously getting older. You need to think about the future at edge. And if you feel like Laiatu Latu is somebody that you can get some good years out of, that's somebody that I think you need to be able to pursue. And especially because,
everything that I've heard about Laiatu Latu is that there are not concerns. I haven't read a single thing that says that past injury is a concern. He left University of Washington. There was actually a Seattle-based rugby team that brought him in for a tryout, and they offered him a contract right away to go play rugby for them. He trained with them for a while. He was loving it. He actually will talk about that. There's multiple interviews out there where Latu is saying, like, yeah, that time was great. It showed me a lot. Like, I actually learned a lot in terms of like, tackling and stuff like that from the training with that. Goes down to UCLA. I'm spitballing here, so if I'm incorrect, please forgive me. Don't hold me to this. But I don't think that he missed a game at UCLA, if I'm remembering correctly. Like, there's no concerns in what I'm seeing. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I haven't heard of any reports of him meeting with a team and them having concerns about his medicals. I haven't heard. There's no smoke. There's no smoke. So if he falls on draft day, I think it'd be a surprise. I'll tell you this much. I think Laiatu Latu is in consideration for Chicago at 9. That's how good I think Laiatu Latu is. And all the smoke that I'm hearing is that it's nothing but ascension for him. I don't think that we have a chance at him. Like, I really don't. But if somehow we do, then you get him. Because I was watching his film. One of the notes that I wrote down is that he reminds me of a young Von Miller, which is ironic because Von Miller's in the building. But we obviously know what Von Miller was in his prime. And don't talk to me about the Von Miller contract and bring up that drama. That's not what this is about. Just stylistically, a speed rusher that might be a little bit light, but not super light. Like, he's fine. Like, his body composition's good. A speed rusher that can get around the edge with ease, that can chop down the inside arm of offensive linemen. Like, I love Laiatu Latu. He's one of my favorite players in this draft cycle. And if there's some way we can get him, I'm in. Like I said, if he just starts to slide a little bit, and he's like within range, late teens, early 20s, something like that. If he gets down into there, I could absolutely see Brandon Beane being like, yeah, I'm going to go get that dude. Like, he's one of the few guys on the board where I think Beane could jump up and get him.
Yeah, the way that, I've heard John talk about him, the way I've read, other articles about him, he's a top 10 talent. Like, that's where he is. He's a top 10 talent. And if he falls to the Bills at 28, in the Josh Allen era, I do not ever expect the Bills to have a top 10 pick. Like, that's just not going to happen. We're not going to be bad enough where we pick in the top 10. So if a guy that is that talented or is as talented enough to be in that range falls to you take them and you deal with the consequences of the injury concerns at a later date. And I pulled up Banged Up Bills, who tweeted out just a really quick snippet of the injury, and he said the only media reports have him having a fusion and later being forced to medically retire. Like John said, from what I was hearing, he has cervical stenosis and at least one bulging disc upper higher at C4. I have no idea what any of those words mean. It doesn't sound good, but again, these teams have access to way deeper medical records than will publicly be reported. They put them through the absolute gauntlet of medical testing. So if the Bills have him in-house, run a test on him, and they're like, there's nothing wrong here. And every other team is, kind of worried about these injuries, and he ends up falling to the Bills. Yeah, take him. I would rather go for a player like him that seems this talented than, Brian Thomas, for instance. People seem really enamored by Brian Thomas, but from the sounds of it, if we're comparing talent levels at their respective position, this guy's way the hell up here, and a lot of other players are right like here, which is still great. But I want the elite. I don't want the great.
I think so, and I think there's elite upside there with Laiatu Latu. I think that he definitely has that within him. Like you said, he's a top 10 talent. There's no question about that. So again, if you're getting a top 10 talent at picks like 18 to 23, you give a little bit of on top to move up and make that pick. Yeah, I'm all for it. I would be stoked. Like, that would be just a home run of a pick. And then you go, okay, cool. Now, how do we address wide receiver? Do we think that someone's going to be there? What's the plan?
Yeah, I think that we will all see exactly how concerning Laiatu Latu's medicals are based on where he's drafted.
Yeah.
If he goes as high as 9 to Chicago's second pick, then
all good.
Yeah, I would imagine Chicago and most of the NFL is probably like, yeah, he's good to go, and we'll be okay with that. But if he starts drifting more into that 20+ range, then yeah, I'd be totally fine with the Bills trading up a couple spots to get somebody like him and help secure the future of their pass rush moving forward. Mike Collins is gonna bring up something here that is something worth talking about. Kool-Aid or bust. We're not talking about the beverage, folks. We're talking about the player Kool-Aid McKinstry from the University of Alabama. Now, I already see the sighing and the groaning and the hand on the face from John right now, which makes me feel like this is not a direction that he wants the Bills to go into.
It's not. I think that cornerback, in terms of depth at the position, is something the Bills should be looking at in the draft. I do. I don't think it's a top priority by any means. I think there are, let's see, if you have a elite interior offensive lineman like Jackson Powers Johnson, I'd go that route. If you have a top edge, if you have a top 5 wide receiver, if you have interior defensive line like Johnny Newton available to you, I think there are many positions that I would rather go. Cooper DeJean up there, because in my opinion, he's head and shoulders above Kool-Aid McKinstry at this point in terms of how I project those players to be. So I'd be cool with Kool-Aid. I'm sorry. Nope. Psych. I'd be cool with Cooper DeJean because I think Cooper DeJean also has that flexibility to kind of move kind of everywhere throughout the secondary. I don't think that Kool-Aid has that, even though he has an old name. And I would love to just say, oh, yeah, anytime he did anything great, it would be elite. Like, for the content, it would be terrific. But in my opinion, I don't think Kool-Aid McKinstry is a first-round pick. I don't think he's going to go in this round. I think there is a few corners that are in the conversation. In my opinion, I think there's going to be 3 defensive backs taken in the first round. I think it's going to be Terrion Arnold. I think it's going to be Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. And I think it's going to be Cooper DeJean. I think this is going to be the 3 defensive backs that go in the first round. Maybe a team gets antsy and they go Kool-Aid super late, like a 29, like just after us. But I don't have a grade on Kool-Aid that puts him in the first round. I don't have a grade on any of these other cornerbacks that put him up there into that conversation. So I see a comment that says Nate Wiggins. He is small, and that is a concern. That's definitely a concern for NFL teams. There might be some teams that are okay with it, but I don't have his measurables in. Let's see if I have it here in front of me. Oh, I do. 6'1", 173. Confirmed at the comment. 173 is light. And that is a concern. He's very talented. He's a good mover, but I think there's going to be teams that look at that weight and go, man, I got a hard time taking a 173-pound corner in the first round. So we'll see. He could definitely sneak in there. That's a possibility for sure. Not for Buffalo. I don't see that being a fit with what the Bills want to do at all. So we'll see. But outside of those top 3 defensive backs, I don't see anyone that's worthy. Yeah, Charles, I see your comment. He put up 10 pounds at combine. Anyone can do that if you eat enough McDonald's. Okay, like I'm not that concerned. But even still, okay, cool. He's 183. You're still comfortable with that as a round one corner? I know he has good ball skills. I know he's a mover. I know he can cover pretty well. But to me, a round one corner is pretty far from what we need to do. I'm cool drafting depth at the position. I am. I think that getting depth at the position is great. One of the reasons I like Cooper DeJean is because you can move him to safety. You can bring him down into the box. You can put him at nickel. You can do a lot of things with him. You want Nate Wiggins in the slot going against the tight end? No. Nope. Don't like that. That doesn't check out for me. So I think there's concerns there. Yeah, I think there's other positions that they're going to consider more highly than going defensive back in the first round, unless it's Cooper DeJean or Quinyon Mitchell. If Quinyon Mitchell there at 28, okay, that can get fun because Quinyon's a stud. That dude is a lockdown corner, and he was icing everybody up down at the Senior Bowl. He was like quiet movement, like not twitchy, not excitable, like anything like that. He was just like rock steady and quiet, and I was like, all right, that's a dude. Like, he can play.
I feel like Quinyon Mitchell is always being mocked to the Colts at 15.
I see that
for
a
good
lot.
reason. So it would surprise me if he's available at that point. Uber, you had something to say.
Yeah, I just throwing this one thing out here. I looked up Nate Wiggins' RAS score, and I comped it to Emmanuel Forbes. I've never seen 2 scores almost as close to the same. They're almost exactly the same, give or take a few pounds. And Emmanuel Forbes had some serious issues with Washington this year, getting bodied by receivers just because he wasn't big enough. So I don't know much about Nate Wiggins as I'm not a big college football fan, obviously, but that weight terrifies me as just a general understander, I guess, of football. And when you're a giant body running at a little body, it's much harder for little body to take you down, especially now because you're not even allowed to swivel your hips in the NFL anymore. So I don't know how a guy that's 173 pounds is going to tackle someone like Derrick Henry. But yeah, when it comes to defensive backs too, like outside of a special talent, like the 2 corners that John had mentioned, as well as Cooper DeJean, I don't need the Bills to take a corner early, or really a safety for that matter, just because there's one position group I trust Sean McDermott to develop more than any. It's defensive back. He's a defensive back guru. Yep. He's done it with safeties and corners. He can find a guy like Christian Benford in the 6th round and turn them into a legitimate starter in the NFL. The Bills can draft a guy in the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th round, and they'll turn him into a player that can fit on this roster. I don't need them kind of throwing that 1st round pick at somebody unless it's one of those uber talented players, and kind of wasting that asset for something that I know that they can outproduce later in the draft.
Yeah, that's exactly what Roy Collins says here. Being probably willing to dress cornerback till day 3, and probably because he doesn't have to until day 3. He has faith, as well as he should, in this coaching staff to put together a good enough defensive back room where it shouldn't be a huge concern. Let's just as John kind of fixes something here for a second. What we're gonna try and wrap things up in the next 15 minutes or so. Uber, is there a player that you really like that you want to focus on? Any position group, anyone that we haven't talked about yet that you want to just highlight here at the end?
Yeah, let me highlight 2 just real quick. And one you already kind of brought up
right off the bat. That's fine.
Yeah, one I'll just do really quick. It's Chop Robinson. And I've seen some Bills fans allude to the Aaron Maben comp, which I'm not going to throw that at Chop Robinson. The Lance Zierlein has him listed as his player comp is Micah Parsons, which I'm also not going to believe until I see that on the field, because Micah Parsons is a freak. I don't know if Chop Robinson will be that, but he is a super, his testing scores, super powerful. Like, his legs are insane. He's got a 4.48 40, a 4.25 shuttle, and a over almost 11-foot broad jump, all of which are in the 90th percentile for an edge rusher, defensive end style player. So he's someone that's interesting to me. The other player that's interesting to me for different reasons, I don't really know how to feel about this, and this would be at pick 60, or maybe if the Bills get back into the third round somehow and he falls, T'Vondre Sweat. Now, he just got a DWI, so that'll drop his draft stock a little bit. I don't know how his personality is. I have no idea. It seems like there's probably some immaturity there based on that. But a 366-pound big boy that can stack the middle of the defensive line, that has me interested. I don't know if that'll work. That's almost too big to work in the NFL. I don't know if he'll have the athleticism to be able to play, well enough at this level. But I'm interested. That's not a 28th pick, 60th maybe, and like I said, third. John, you seem a little bit frustrated with T'Vondre Sweat. Let me hear your thoughts on that, because I'm just looking at the size. I like a big boy. He's a big boy.
He is definitely a big boy. So I can't really speak to the personality issues or any sort of character concern or stuff like that. Obviously, listen, I'm not a reporter. I'm not plugged in. I don't have inside intel here. So I'm not going to besmirch a guy when I don't have any reason to say that. Obviously, I would say the WI is a concern. That's public knowledge. That happened. That's not great. That's something that any NFL team is going to be doing a ton of due diligence on here in the pre-draft process. I would say it helps his cause that it happened a couple weeks, 3 weeks before the NFL draft, because it gives teams time to talk about it, to call his agent, to be like, what happened? What's going on? Can we talk to T'Vondre? Can we figure out what's up here? Instead of it being one of those situations like a Laramie Tunsil, where on draft night a picture is posted with him in the gas mask falling, right? Because there's no time to do any work at that point. It's just, we have this picture. We don't know. We haven't talked to them. We haven't had time to process this info. It's just brand new info thrown right in. Okay. Reminds me a little bit of Jalen Carter last year. Same sort of thing. Right? Jalen Carter had a similar situation in Georgia. I think he was street racing. Showed up to his pro day kind of out of shape. He was thrilled about that. He was originally in conversation, I remember, for the Bears at 10th overall. That was a conversation that was being had about Jalen Carter. They ended up passing on him. He goes to Philly. Great landing spot for him with the right culture and good coaching and veteran presence and stuff like that, and showed a ton of promise as a rookie. He's on his way. Okay, cool. There you go. T'Vondre Sweat, it's kind of similar in that sense, where it happened well before the draft. It happened before the pro day, if I remember correctly. It's a really similar timeline, actually, to Jalen Carter's situation. But it's still tough, because he seems to have to justify a defensive tackle that is going through something like that off the field. What does it mean about his character? They got to ask those questions. And honestly, the size that he's at is a bit concerning. In 2022 at Texas, he played in the 340 range. He was 25 pounds lighter in 2022 at Texas. And then going into 2023, he puts on this weight. He was in the 260s, 263, I think is what he was listed at. Or three, I'm sorry, not 263. No, I'm 100 pounds off, guys. I am a sixth grader off. He's 363. 340 is what he played at in 2022. 363, I think, is what he was listed at this last year down at Texas. And honestly, it showed. It showed on tape. I think his stamina was not there. His ability to finish out games was not there. I think his technique got sloppy as games went along. As the games got later, I think his hands were kind of sagging. He wasn't as quick out of his stance. There was definitely concerns there when you watch it on tape. So me and Daniel Harms, my co-host of Cover One Draft Weekly, please go give us a listen. We talked about this a few weeks ago before the combine. And I told him in the pre-combine conversations, I'm like, I would love to see Sweat show up 15, 20 pounds lighter. Like, I'd love to see that he was putting in the work, that he decided to cut some weight, show a little bit more agility, a little more stamina, do the on-field drills. Like, I would have loved to see that going into it. And he didn't. He showed up 3 pounds heavier than he was listed at. And I was like, all right, that's what he wants to do. And that's a choice. I don't know if that's the right choice, but it's a choice. And he decided that I want to be a mountain of a human being that is hard to move off the spot. Okay, but at defensive tackle in the NFL, you still need to be able to finish games. You need to be able to finish. I don't really care how you play in the first and second quarter. If you're out there gassed, not generating any pressure, and you're not absorbing these double teams, and you're not clogging up lanes and being a disruptor on the interior late in the game, especially as a one tech, which he is, which I don't even know if that really fits what Buffalo wants to do. I don't know if they want the big one tech guy as so much as they want the athletic 3 techs that can go get back there and disrupt and get home. If you're going to be a one tech, you need to be a one tech that can play the entire game, command those double teams, push back, collapse the pockets, like get in there. And I've got concerns with his ability to finish those games. When we're talking about a Buffalo Bills team that is looking up, and I'm sorry, this is going to sound mean to say, but we're looking up at the Big Brother Chiefs. Okay, we were looking up at the Big Brother Patriots forever, and now we're looking up at the Big Brother Chiefs team, Patrick Mahomes, and his ability to navigate a pocket and all that stuff. Patrick Mahomes got the ball in his hands, 2.5 minutes left. He's got the ball on his own 20 and 2 timeouts. Is T'Vondre Sweat going to be the guy in the interior of that defensive line that can collapse the pocket in the fourth quarter, that can get home, that can clog up a running lane? Is he going to be the guy in the fourth quarter they hand it off to Isaiah Pacheco, and he stops Isaiah Pacheco for a no gain? Cool. Great. Now the Bills are ahead. It's 2nd and 10. But Kansas City had to burn one of their timeouts because T'Vondre Sweat got the tackle for no gain. Is he going to be the guy that can do that late in the game or not? And right now, I don't think he is. And if I'm looking at making a draft pick, that's the parameters that I'm looking at if I'm Buffalo. I'm sorry, Buffalo. We're not trying to be good. We're trying to be great. We are trying to be great. This is Josh Allen prime. We are trying to compete. We're trying to knock off the Chiefs. We're sick of getting beat in the playoffs. You need guys that can show up for 60 minutes, even if they're rotational, okay? Even if they're a rotational player, which is perfectly fine on the defensive line. But T'Vondre Sweat, late in the fourth, is he going to show up collect the pocket against Creed Humphreys in the fourth quarter when they're handed off to Isaiah Pacheco on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 7 and be able to generate a plus situation for the defense? I have concerns about that. I don't know, see the stamina, and then you take into concern this DWI, and it's like, is that what you want to do? Like, are you putting your best foot forward right now? Does this matter to you enough to put in the work to get right? And I thought his 2022 film was better than his 2023, and it was those late game situations. And he's the same weight, if not a little bit heavier than he was listed for Texas in those situations. And that to me is a big. So I don't like it. I don't like it. If you're telling me that we can get him with one of those 4th round picks, he falls down the board late because people have the same concerns and he's available in one of those 4th round picks. Sure. All right. That's cool. I'm not using one of my first 2 picks on the guy right now is how it stands. Sorry for the diatribe. I went off the rails.
Oh, no, but see, this is why you're here, because I was not privy to a lot of this history. So this is definitely helpful.
Yeah.
All right. Any last final parting thoughts on this particular group of players, on anyone that you haven't talked about before we sign off here?
I want to put my pin in the name Malik Mustafa. Safety out of Wake Forest. It's a dude that I love. Flies downhill, hits hard, tackles. His compete is great. His diagnosis is great. His athleticism is great. I know that we're good with our like starting safeties going into this year probably. Like I don't think there's any guy that they're going to draft that's going to like step right in and take one of those 2 spots. But you want to give me an athletic guy that can jump out of the building, that also has a proven track record on special teams, which is how you're going to want these guys to get on day 1. You want a 4th round safety to be a special team, gunner on kickoff, something like that, and be able to fly downhill, make some tackles. He can do that. It's all over his tape. It's all over the place. Plenty of him on special teams. He's a heat-seeking missile on special teams. And I'm like, okay, cool. You're going to give me a 4th round safety that's a special teams ace. That's maybe your 3rd safety on the depth chart that can develop and grow to be in one of those starting 2 guys in a 2 high look that Buffalo likes to run. Yeah, sign me up. I'm just putting my pin before I sign off that Malik Mustafa is a my guy for the Buffalo Bills in this draft class, especially all that capital between rounds 4 and 6. I would love to see that out of Wake Forest. Not a lot of love on the Wake Forest safety, but yeah, sign me up. Malik Mustafa, I want it.
It's a very common like day 3 pick that I see in a lot of people's mocks for people that want like a potential safety that they're interested in. That's definitely, and I've seen that in a lot of Bills fans mocks as well. So it's not that surprising. Very quickly for me, I am intrigued by Grant Barton from Duke. I think that he's a very versatile player. A lot of people kind of seem like, well, there's a lot of talk about like he can play like all five positions on the offensive line. Realistically, he's probably more on the interior somewhere, which again is where the Bills have a sort of need. If there aren't a lot of great options, I don't know how comfortable I'd be taking him at 28. I like him.
No.
I don't know if I love him at 28. I think that I would rather trade back at that point and see if you can get him or one of these sort of tier 2 wide receivers with a high 2nd round pick rather than necessarily taking him at 28. But he is somebody that I like and is somebody that I'm interested in. That is going to do it for us. Thank you all for joining us on this lovely Monday night. Having a lovely special guest in Jon Helmkamp. If you have not already subscribed to the Cover One College Football channel, it is a separate channel. They have a separate feed. Go subscribe to that right now. Go look for Cover One Draft Weekly. Go look at Marlin Show, the Cover One College Football. What happened on Saturday, whatever. All that good stuff happens over at that channel. You have Cover One Fantasy with Chris Chuse and all the crazy amount of work that he does every week. You have this channel with, obviously you've got us, you've got Ray Raid Hour, you've got Under Review with Joe DeRosa, you've got Disguised Coverage, you've got The Film Room, you've got Thomas DeLouse with Buffalo Late Night, you've got If the Walls Could Talk. Whatever you need, Bills-wise, Buffalo Bills-wise, we have you covered here at Cover One. That is part of what we do here. John, we'll start with you. Where can the people find you?
Thanks so much for having me on. This was last second, just threw it in the DM. Less than an hour to go to showtime, but thanks for having me on. We're in the Cover One group chat. They're like, hey, we're talking about non-wide receiver draft prospects tonight. I'm like, you want to guess? Like, I'll come chop it up. Let's have some fun. And we got after it. So thanks for having me on. No prep, no show notes. We're just jumping in and we're talking. Dude, we're going.
This is just like half of what we do here anyway.
Yeah.
Like,
I love it.
That's what we do.
Where
can the people
find
phenomenal.
You on Twitter? Yeah, on Twitter at Jon Helmkamp right there if you're watching on YouTube. Feel free to find me there. That's where I'm doing all my talking on a daily basis and raving as we're closing in on 9 days until the NFL draft. It's right around the corner, so we're there, man. It's gonna happen. I'm licking my chops. I'm ready to go. I'm waiting for the big trade because I think there's gonna be one in the first round. It's gonna happen. Yes. I want to see what it is. I want to know what it's going to look like. Is it the Chargers trading out to Minnesota for them to come up and try to take JJ McCarthy? Is it the Arizona Cardinals who seem to be asking for too much right now, 4th overall pick? And there's just so many conflicting reports. Like, this is the crazy time. We're in it. We're in the crazy. The crazy trade could happen at any time. And I'm just like locked in Hawkeye vision all in right now, NFL draft. So this is the beauty of it. This is what I live for, and we're going to get after it. So join me for the ride on Twitter at Jon Helmkamp. As was mentioned early in the show, I'll be there live at the NFL draft. We're going to have a little tool set up, it sounds like, and doing some live show stuff. And I'm going to be kind of a live correspondent, bopping around and trying to ask questions to players and popping back in and talking about stuff and just having a wild time. It's great. So let's get after it and enjoy the draft. As Bills fans, I think Bills fans should be stoked. I think pick 28 has a lot of potential. I think there's possibility for a trade up. I think there's possibility for a trade down. I think there's a lot of ways to look at this, and all of them look pretty good. So I'm excited to see how this plays out.
I agree. Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on Twitter, obviously tweeting constant nonsense. So I'll continue to do that every day and all days. And then as we start ramping up here to the NFL draft, like Jon was mentioning with trades, I plan to be tweeting out my own version of a draft value chart for every single trade. I think we'll probably, I don't know if we'll get one before the draft hits, but once the draft gets going, I'm sure there'll be plenty. So I'll be tweeting out a bunch during that.
Just as being in the Cover One draft chart. Sorry, David, to cut you off. Being in the Cover One draft chart, we've talked about this on the back end. I've seen some of the work that Uber's been putting in. It's beautiful, guys. Like, this is going to be so good. Like, I cannot wait for this to like fully hit the ground running and be live. It is legit. He's been putting in hours and hours and hours and hours of work into this thing. So like, I applaud the hustle, and I just want to thank you for doing that. As a draft guy, as someone that loves the draft, like, that's so cool to see and to have resources available. So applause to you for putting in that work.
Appreciate it.
It's going to be great. I'm excited to see it. It's going to be really cool.
Cool.
You all can find me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy. We are going to be here next Monday. We'll do our final mock draft next Monday. We will also be a part of the draft coverage. We will be, me and Uber will be doing day 3. I don't know if I should be saying that. Am I allowed to say that? I'm going to assume I'm allowed to say that. I don't know why it would be a secret.
Sure.
They tweeted it out. Yeah.
They can fire me later.
Yeah.
We'll be a part of day 3 coverage. We'll be with you all day long. We'll see if we can. I have some plans in my mind. We'll see how many of those come into actual fruition come next Saturday. But for now, for tonight, thank you all for tuning in. We are very grateful to each and every one of you. Leave a like on your way out. Subscribe to all the different channels that we're on. Subscribe and follow us on your various podcast feeds. Leave a 5-star review if you are so inclined. And thank you for watching. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.